Hello and welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Dave Albert. In this show, I talk about technology, building a company as a CTO and co-founder, and have guests to discuss their roles in technology and entrepreneurship. And we're back after a break for the holidays and the rush of the end of December. I'm finally back with some more episodes. I've got a number of great interviews lined up. Or interviews, that's not really the right word. You know what I mean. Guest episodes where I get to have some unique discussions with some very interesting people. We had our biannual, I guess, team meetup where some of the folks we have in India came over to visit and had a number of team sessions. I think we got ourselves in a really good spot procedurally. We worked on how we were going to work with Product Board to make the work more visible, more targeted at the actual value that gets delivered, and are using it a bit more within our stand-ups, and that's making our grooming go a little bit better. This was before the end of the year break, so last week was a little rocky, just because so many people had taken some time off and we needed to reorient ourselves after the new year. There were a few things that I've really realized and learned between the team sessions and what I found after the break that I wanted to share. So one of the first things would be that we had this session during the team meetup that was called What If? So we just proposed questions, or Julie had some questions for us that we all gave input on before the meeting, the week of the meetings. And she organized it into this what if session. So I can't remember all of the different what ifs, but like, for instance, what if we had to acquire a certain number of users within a month, without taking into account budget or anything like that, just to think more creatively about different areas that we'd already been, working on, but how we might be able to trigger some thoughts that hadn't occurred to us by removing some constraints and adding additional constraints that weren't there before. I thought it was a really useful session. So that is not so far off of how the episode or not the episode, but the podcast kind of got rolling after that first rough year. It was kind of what if I just started doing it, but they're like separate, different types of what ifs, I suppose. The idea is to take some specific area that you're trying to work on, and it's kind of like a brainstorming tool, I suppose. And then afterwards you can go through and refine what is really doable, what's not. I know we came up with a number of no-brainer things throughout all of our sessions. And that's really one of the greatest things about having the whole team together is we go through and identify some of the longer term, what are some of the more idealistic ways that we might go and achieve some of our desired results. But then also it's easier to spot things that we just should obviously just do now, that don't require large amounts of planning or large amounts of development work. They're small steps towards our bigger goals that we can make quite easily. It just seems so much easier to do that when we're all in the same room together and have mapped things out more visually, with, Post-its or flip charts or whiteboards or things like that. Another bit of a session we had was on, is there anything we need to remove from Medit? So obviously, as people creating a platform and an app, you're always trying to add elements that are valuable for the users. But one of the things that I always want to make sure that we do is come back around and think, what is it that is here that we've put a lot of work into? Yes, but is not really bringing anyone value. Can we remove that? What can we remove? If anything, there's not always something that can be removed, but you need to definitely remind yourselves to ask that question regularly. So, the theory of sunk costs, where you don't want to get rid of something because, we've already spent so much time, effort, money, whatever, on creating, implementing, learning, whatever. Is there a thinking that you must still stick with it because of the costs that you've sunk into it? That's a fallacy. That was the word I couldn't grab earlier. So the fallacy of sunken costs. So we didn't necessarily come up with, we kind of did come up with a section of the app that isn't working well. And it probably makes sense to remove it soon and then rework how it might be used. So it's our lists. So lists are lists of sources, whereas collections are collections of articles. Now, obviously, that's easy to say in a descriptive way, but it's much harder to represent it to the users, or at least it has been for us so far. And it just isn't working. We don't have many people using them, but we have ways in mind for how we can make it a much more valuable feature. So that brought me to the addition by subtraction. I just find that as a really interesting concept, and I've kind of been doing that with my own life. Not as much as I would actually like to, but for instance, I removed a bunch of social media apps from my phone. I realized that I really wasn't getting value from it. It was just provoking outrage, and that was all it was doing. So I found myself only reading deeply any Medium articles when I disagreed with the topic. So now I'm not saying that everybody's that way, but it's just the general tone of the way social media goes. is that either you're finding things that you agree with or disagree with. So it's either confirmation bias or outrage. That seems to be the only thing that I was getting from most of my reading in Medium, Facebook, LinkedIn, all the inputs like that. The either short to medium form things, even dev.to. It's a great community, but I still personally was just using it to fill my my little bits of downtime, standing at the coffee machine or on the bus or waiting for the train. So I've removed those. I still have Twitter because I do communicate with some people on there, and I still have a number of messaging apps. But what I've done is I've moved those to my second screen. My first screen is mostly podcast listening app, Spotify, music, Blinkist, and Audible. I have a few other tools there that I use often. And actually, the bottom row, I've now removed all the constant communication apps and things that require deeper work. So now I've got Calendar, Evernote, voice memos, and Asana. So I'm using Asana now. I change this a lot, trying to figure the right way for me, but I'm using Asana as a list of my current tasks. So I still have things in Trello and product board, but Asana is more for grouping the themes of the work that I need to work on. But I'm not sure how much that will actually continue. As of this week, I'm trying to get back to working from my calendar. So that should start to negate Asana, maybe. I don't know. It's every 6 weeks or so, I end up trying something a little bit different because I haven't found the thing that works for me for managing all of the work, because admin and finance elements that I need to sort out don't really fit on our development board for Trello, and they definitely don't fit in product board. So instead of having an additional Trello board for me, which I've done, and that just didn't work out either. I tried Asana, and that was working well, but now I'm going to try to work from my calendar again more. I've done it in the past and it worked pretty well, but I think the biggest mistake I made in the past was, I couldn't have my phone near me turned up, or I would see all the notifications that came in. But what I've been doing is my phone's on airplane mode a lot of the time now. And I only turn it off of airplane mode either when I'm expecting some important or urgent communications, or when I'm ready to deal with things that will send notifications. So when I go to bed, I turn it on airplane mode, and then at a point in the morning, which I haven't turned it off yet, because, I get up early. It's 4:35 a.m. So it's still on airplane mode, and it probably will be until I get into the office. I plan to use the time on the bus for a little bit of deep thinking, since I'm, confined to a specific place and can still use some of the applications that I need to reference things. So I make sure to sync Evernote the night before and have my 5-minute journal, at least from the day before. I'm still sorting out the right time to send that, so that I'll have it before, so that I can do that on the bus. Because I have a if this then that sends the new note, but I think I've currently got it set to 4, because that was before I started using the airplane mode trick. But I've found that my phone is a lot less stressful to be around now, because I don't need to know the instant that somebody sends me a notification in the morning. All that does is basically turn my day into trying to catch up, instead of getting some of the little bits done that I want to make sure to have done as the first part of the day, the record an episode when I have one, or post an episode, which I can actually do the posting in the evening as I'm finishing up. But the only time I can really record an episode is first thing in the morning before the kids are up and the house is too noisy. So that's why that is first thing I want to make sure I get done. Then deep thinking on the bus. So if I don't have notifications, then I won't be just running around chasing my tail by the time the day's over, and have never thought about what I really want to accomplish within the day. And then I'm trying to catch up during stand-up of what I actually need to get done, instead of being able to think about it. And that kind of came from another bit that I wanted to talk about, which was the actual deep work itself. So I didn't do a great job of taking as much of a break as I wanted, or planned to. I got a little antsy and had to get back to writing some code. And there's this project that we're working on that I needed to answer a lot of big unknown questions on, because this project is for a partner of ours, and it's, even though we will work in an agile fashion, the specifications are truly a waterfall ordeal. We have to make sure to nail down everything that's going to be involved early, spec out the estimates of how long it will take to build it, because it's based on some payment and some internal costs and some external costs. And it's one of those things that if we don't get it at least close, which, these things never work out accurately, because estimation is impossible for anything of any complexity. And this is actually turned into a quite a bit more complex project than expected from the initial discussions. So I had to do quite a number of prototypes, but because it was during the break and no one was in need of anything from me, basically started a couple of days after Christmas and got more than a week to work on it, where mostly I was trying to get the just the timings, but what it turned into is a lot of the base work of the app. And I felt so productive doing it, and realized it was because I wasn't jumping over into notifications and hopping into the 19 different conversations. Which, that was one of the things that we had brought up within the team before the break, even before the team meeting, was that we treat Slack a little too urgently. And the new strategy is, unless stated otherwise, Slack discussions are not urgent, or at least not immediately urgent. So there's no need to respond to every notification instantly. And I've usually done a good job of hiding. So I set my Mac to do not disturb mode. I had been turning my phone to silent and turning it over, but now, so that I can work from my calendar, once I've synced the calendar and set it in airplane mode, there are no notifications other than the calendar. So that actually works really well for that instance. And actually, I've not been using the Slack app. I've been using it in the web browser. And so I actually close it so that I don't accidentally see it. In the past, I've already turned the badges off on email and Slack because I'd always see those on the Mac. I don't necessarily want those turned off on the phone because I do kind of want to see those when I'm in the mode to look. So it's just another reminder of why you can get so much more done when you're actually deep in the work. I made a lot of really, what I think are solid decisions on the way things will be built that will enable us to build it quicker and more stably. So it'll be more stable, the development process. And just, I want to make sure that I and the team bring that into the new year. We're already, what is this? This is about midway into January. It's the 7th. Okay. Not quite midway, but, a quarter of the way, I suppose. So the deep work, which ties into the addition by subtraction of removing all the things so that's basically my only New Year's goal. Wouldn't really call it a resolution, but to remove things that don't make my life better. I've done a really good job of removing sugar and a lot of processed foods. So I'm eating healthier already just by removing the things that make me feel worse. So that's actually helped a good deal too with my focus. I'm able to focus more because I'm not having so many, the body's not crashing because of the coming off of sugar highs, or I've got less inflammation in the body. So I feel a lot better by removing sugars and highly processed foods. Let's hope I can keep that up now that I'm back to the office this week. And the other thing that this project that I've worked on that actually, was for the estimations, it actually turned into the base of the project. I also was able to use Cosmos DB in a greenfield project to actually see how we might use it, format it, which I've talked about in a previous quick take about how the collections are not the same way that collections are in Mongo, where with Mongo you have a different collection where it makes sense. With Cosmos, that's not really the way it is, because it seems to be more of a Mongo API over top of Elasticsearch. So having separate collections does have a cost with it in computing terms, but also in Azure costs. So having all of your data in one collection is the only affordable way to do it, or at least a small number of collections. But every field is indexed unless you explicitly turn indexing off. So that means that by building different ID signatures, I was able to use that in this project at a smaller scale, because this project, even if financially it becomes a large scale project, the number of simultaneous users would be handfuls, because it's not a mass scale type app, but it is complex and has a lot of requirements and can deliver a lot of value, but not for a lot of people at a time. So it should be much easier to deal with, but this has given me the opportunity to make sure that with using Cosmos, that the app would be much easier to scale, because data is basically the only thing that's persistent. It does have a caching layer in it using Redis, but that is really more for sessions for the CMS than for the actual usage part. So it's the persistent layer is really only the data. So it's going to make it a lot easier to scale at the scale that this would go. But yeah, so I was able to do what I'd anticipated from that earlier episode of using a signature. So for instance, user. So it's something like user : the username, and then : a version number. So this application has some high requirements for being able to roll back things. Not so much the user, but you have multiple people who will be making changes to the different types of content in the CMS. And when that happens, you always want to be able to roll back. Even if that isn't necessarily one of the first things that you build in, you need to be able to get to that. Otherwise, one user may accidentally make a mistake, and that affects a lot of other users, and that's never a good thing. So by doing that, only searching for the signature and is active, true, you then find the right version. So it's pretty easy to see all the things that are active, and still be able to roll back a version because they all match that signature. So if you don't look for the active ones, then you can step back through, and because the version numbers are automatically incremented through each save, then it's easy to make sure to store relevant information that was used in the past and easily update going forward. Obviously, you could do that with any database, but I was able to do that where each different model of data follows the same pattern so that using a single collection actually makes sense. That is pretty much all I wanted to discuss today. I think I've got a few more interesting elements, but those should all be separated into different quick takes. I said earlier that I've got a number of really interesting guests lined up. We have to finalize the dates, but I actually hope to be recording one or two this week. And then definitely within the month, there should be a number of episodes with guests that I'll finally be able to arrange. It's really hard to get people together during the run up to the break for the holidays and the end of the year. So that was a bit tougher than expected. So that's why there were no episodes in December, but we're at about 30 minutes. It's a bit shorter than I'd expected, but it is what it is. So I hope I brought you value. As always, you can email me, podcast@dave-albert.com, or on Twitter. As I said, I still have that on my phone, @Dave_Albert. Thanks for listening.
Until next time, remember, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.